Welcome to the 46th Writers Week at UCR. 46 years of incredible literary presence. We at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many Indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. Further, we offer acknowledgement to the Asian, Latino, and African American communities who have also built and tended to this city and its surroundings, oftentimes displaced and disenfranchised, despite their labor and commitment to the area. It is our third year online, and we couldn't be more thrilled than to offer captions and ASL interpreters throughout our sessions. And this year we have some on-campus, in-person events for those close enough to attend. We hope that you attend many events this week and spread the news that we are presenting these 33 writers free of charge to all. Pre-registration for virtual events is required, so spread the links as you spread the news. All of the books are available through UCR, Barnes & Noble, and Cellar Door Books online. Please support our authors by buying their books. And following each reading, please stick around for our live Q&A session. With no further ado, we welcome and greatly appreciate everyone here attending this 46th UCR Writers Week Festival. All of our writers presenting, all of our volunteer panel moderators, ASL presenters, and everyone who tunes into these recordings in the post-festival virtual continuum, and to everyone here attending now, welcome to the 46th UCR Writers Week Festival.
Welcome to Writers Week. This session features three fantastic writers, Vanessa Hua, Joseph Hahn, and Bojan Louis. Vanessa Hua is a columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle and author of A River of Stars, Deceit and Other Possibilities, and Forbidden City. A National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellow, she has received a Rona Jaffe Foundation Writers Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, a Steinbeck Fellowship, and honors from the Society of Professional Journalists and the Asian American Journalists Association. She has taught at the Warren Wilson MFA Program for Writers, University of San Francisco, and the Sewanee Writers Conference. The daughter of Chinese immigrants, she lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with her family. Joseph Hahn is the author of Nuclear Family, a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice and NPR Best Book of 2022. He was selected as a 2022 National Book Foundation 5 Under 5 honoree and received a Kundiman Fellowship in Fiction. His work has appeared in New York Times Magazine, LitHub, and Catapult. Currently, he is an editor for the West region of Joyland Magazine and has a PhD in English and creative writing from the University of Hawaii, Manoa. He lives in Honolulu. Bojan Louis is Diné of the Nakai Diné, born for the Ashihi. He is the author of Sinking Bell, Stories, and a book of poetry, Currents, which has received an American Book Award. He has been a resident at McDowell. He teaches creative writing at the University of Arizona.
It's an honor to join you all at Writers Week. I'll be reading from Forbidden City, which I started writing at UCR. Years ago, a teasing glimpse of documentary footage inspired me. It was a photo of the jowly Chairman Mao surrounded by giggling young women who were dressed in tight sweaters with Peter Pan collars. It turned out that the chairman was a fan of ballroom dancing and young women who partnered with him on the dance floor and in the bedroom. When I looked for more information, I didn't find much. In his memoir, the chairman's physician said it was the highest honor of their lives for these women, the most uplifting, exciting, exhilarating experience they would know. I knew it had to be more complicated than that, and I wanted to tell a story that fell outside of the official record through the eyes of one of these teenagers. The scene I'll read opens on the day she leaves her village. Forbidden City. At dawn, Ma filled our wooden tub with hot water. She hadn't bathed me in years and wouldn't have done so again until my wedding day. A few meters away, my sisters slumbered. Later, I'd wonder if they might have been pretending, their parting gift to offer me the privacy I never had there. Ma squatted behind me and poured ladles of water over my head, the scent of dust and sweat rising off in the steam. The drops trickled down my nape, my shoulders, my chest, every part of me cherished. I leaned into her hands. Her breathing became ragged, and I felt her trembling through my body until we were both shaking. "Little May," she murmured. When I tried to turn around, she gripped my shoulders. The water in the tub had gone lukewarm, and I shivered, the hairs raised on the back of my neck and arms. "Ma?" I asked. She didn't answer. She dried me in circling strokes, her hands slowed as if to delay our parting. It was the tenderness I'd always craved from her. Though she must have heard the fear in my voice, she couldn't face me. Not then, maybe not ever again. She would no longer warn me about fox fairies, about shapeshifters who roam the twilight to lure travelers, of disappeared girls, runaway or raped, kidnapped or killed. She knew that she had no choice but to give me up, I can now see, and she didn't want me thinking about the dangers ahead. In that moment, though, I hardened against her, against my fear and my anger. She couldn't help me, and I didn't need her. The picture of the chairman on the wall seemed to nod in the flickering light. He alone would protect me on this journey. Ma helped me step into pants and a tunic that she had patched and pounded clean in the river. She braided my hair into a coil. I gave in to the gentle tugging, in to the mesmerizing firelight, hoping that I would be transformed like the braid, intricate and beautiful and strong as a model revolutionary. Shifting my eyes, I tried to hold still to keep from disturbing my mother's work. It was an hour spent on me alone for what seemed the first time in my life. Gazing into my mother's wrinkled face, I realized she'd once been my age, leaving her family to marry a man she had never met. She didn't know she would endure beatings from her husband, endure the curse of daughters, the death of sons, and swallow suffering as often as air. If she had known, would she have left her village? That was how we survived, by not knowing what was ahead. She pressed a wooden cup into my hands, a murky brew that gave off the smell of boiled pond scum. Sipping it, I winced, my tongue curling back on itself. She pushed it towards me again, and I half gagged. "What's this?" I asked. Instead of answering, she handed me a pouch filled with tiny lumps the color of bone, their stench even more intense than what she'd brewed. The earthy scent reminded me of dong quai, the golden flowers and sturdy roots we gathered every autumn. A desperate neighbor had come asking for it after she'd given birth twice within a year. It helped to keep a baby from taking hold. After I started my woman's flow, Bob warned me against walking by myself at dusk, telling me to bolt from men who got too close. Why, he never said, but I understood. The curves that made me clumsy and set my running off kilter also invited the attentions of men who could ruin me. "Drink this every morning," Ma now said. I finished the brew and set down the bowl. "Every morning," I repeated, then swirled my tongue against my teeth to get rid of the sour, bitter taste. The party's jeep arrived, the roan and rattle. As the hen squawked, Bob climbed off the bed, ladled me a bowl of porridge, and dropped in thick slices of salted turnips. I ate while standing, holding the bowl close to my face. He did too. My father's fingers were the finest part of him, nimble whether mending a basket or plucking a radish. As a teenager, he left for the provincial capital to make his fortune. Although he'd wanted to work in a textile factory, he returned a year later, missing his little finger, a failure that still defined him and our family in the village. I was used to the stump, but his long fingers curved around his bowl now seemed lonely, his hand missing its smallest part. He turned away and coughed, wiping at his mouth. My family never said anything about his cough, yet another ailment among us that lingered and festered, like the sores that never quite healed, the scratch that persisted, the irritation in our eyes that went on for so long we forgot we'd lived any other way. I stared at his hand, the smear of blood undeniable, yet when I looked up, he wordlessly ordered me to ignore it. I set down my bowl, unable to finish more than a few bites. Difficult as this life was, It was all I had known. When Ma brushed down stray hairs at the crown of my head, my resolve disappeared, and the urge to cling to my parents overwhelmed me. Pa lifted my elbow to lead me to the door. Gentle, not rough, this gesture gave me the strength to leave. So May makes her way to the Capitol, and the next scene I'll read takes place on the first time she visits the chairman's bedchambers. And this is what happens afterwards. The chairman propped himself up on his elbow. Some things you look at so often for so long, you miss them, he said. You're opening our eyes to things we've stopped seeing. He rubbed my thigh, smiling with a bubble of pleasure I would come to recognize as a side effect of the pills that put him to sleep. Within moments of turning off the lights, he was snoring, sprawled on his back, his arms and legs splayed, a man no longer accustomed to sharing his bed. Wondering if I could fall asleep beside him, I edged toward the wall as far as I could go, up against a stack of books. When I did my hair, my scalp throbbed in relief. Licking my cracked lips, I tasted blood, salty and sacrificial. I'd been spared from getting pregnant tonight, but I'd run out of my mother's tea, and I'd have to find more. Dong Quai grew in the hills above the village, in the moldering damp beneath the forest canopy. The gardens at the lake palaces were vast, though, and such treatments might have been passed down from dynasty to dynasty. An imperial doctor could have secretly cultivated it here for the empress and the other court ladies, and maybe it still grew here, the gardeners tending it as they would any other ornamental flower. Women had other ways to keep a baby from taking hold. In the dance troupe, Busy Shan once explained that you were most likely to get pregnant a couple weeks after your monthly flow. Think of when the sows are bred. Think of how long it takes before they go into heat. If you washed yourself with vinegar afterwards, rinsing as far up as you could go, you could protect yourself too. You have to wash immediately after, she said. We've been whispering in the lights out in the dorm. Can't Teacher Fan help? I asked. You say one word to her, you're gone, Busy Shan said. To avoid getting sent away, the girls tried to take care of it on their own. Is there anything else? Dolly Yu had asked shyly. You could offer him a dish of tofu, Busy Shan said. Some men love to eat tofu. They want nothing else. Her talk set off shocked giggles. I hadn't understood the joke then, but all at once I now did. Tofu, soft and wet as woman. What the chairman had done to me tonight, I might persuade him to again. And I could do the same to him, which disgusted me so much I could hardly stand to think it, but such an act would keep me from getting pregnant. None of us asked how Busy Shan possessed such knowledge, the sort of wisdom we taught one another, girl to girl, without the help of our mothers, who didn't want us contemplating such matters. When they were our age, they might have whispered about such secrets. Swallow a jar of tea steeped for 2 days, choke down a mouthful of cold ash, jump from a tree, jump 1,000 times a day for a week. We didn't expect a man to concern himself with how to prevent pregnancy or how to end one. Although I'd never slipped into the fields or down by the river, others in my village must have. The newlywed bride who gave birth not so many months after she married, or the sprite of a classmate sent to live with an ailing aunt. When she returned, people said that they could smell the milk on her, the milk meant for the baby she'd given up to another family. In her time away, her waist had thickened, her legs turned stocky and veined, and her high, sweet voice had coarsened. Her parents matched her up with a sickly old man. The widow haunted me most. She hid her pregnancy until she collapsed in the fields and gave birth to a baby boy, raw and red as a skinned rabbit. He died a day later. How broken she was afterward, her arms and legs shambling, her hair matted, a worn-out shoe, a whore. She might have been raped and raped again, every man a suspect. Or she'd been someone's mistress, every wife made vulnerable. She had wronged us all, and in return, we despised her. She had to empty latrines and tote water to the hilliest fields, stuck with the worst chores, until one day she disappeared. Wind now rustled in the trees, their branches tapping against the windows. The chairman shifted, kicking me in my calf. I held still, and he didn't wake up. Back home, my family would curl together on our brick bed. In the dormitory, Midnight Chang would turn her wrath on to another girl, doing to her what she could not to me. I alone had the chairman tonight. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you to UC Riverside for inviting me to share about my work. Thank you to Melanie Ramiro, Tom Lutz, and a special shout out to Allison Adele Hedgecoke, who was a wonderful mentor and without whom I wouldn't have been able to find the language that I needed to tell this story about war, division, and the ongoing impact of separation felt by families across the Korean Peninsula and across the Korean diaspora. Nuclear Family is about the Cho family, who runs a series of Korean plate lunch restaurants that faces backlash after their eldest son, Jacob Cho, is caught attempting to cross the Korean DMZ into North Korea. And the family doesn't know that their son has been possessed by the ghost of his long lost maternal grandfather, whom he's never met, who requires Jacob's body as a vehicle in order to cross the spiritual barrier that has been manifested by the force and power of the Korean DMZ as an arbitrary yet very real and persistent force of rupture that continues to be felt across generations. Nuclear Family was published by Counterpoint Press in June 2022. It was a Best Book of the Year by NPR, Time Magazine, and Esquire, and I was also selected as a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 honoree. And I'm so grateful that writing this book has given me the opportunity to commune with readers and to speak toward emphasizing peace as the only way that we can move through the world and to protect what's sacred, and to protect land from Hawaii to Korea, and all across the world where militarized violence continues to desecrate and pollute the lands and waters of the communities in which military occupation impacts the most. And so I write toward reconciling with an increasingly militarized world, and the border, which has been most felt in my lifetime and continues to be felt as the Korean War is ongoing. I'm going to read from the opening chapter of Nuclear Family, which follows and introduces Jacob's grandfather, Taewoo. Taewoo stood on the ledge behind the Tora Observatory's row of binoculars. No one paid him any mind, since he was long dead. Taewoo had become an outline, his body opaque and waning as his spirit would with time. Until he could find a living relative, Taewoo could only get this far. A white tourist standing right under him, using the pair of binoculars between Taewoo's legs, squealed when he found the propaganda village. Taewoo swung his foot through the tourist's head. He hated the people who visited the DMZ. Folks from all around the world who got a cheap thrill from the proximity to North Korea. Taewoo was close too. No matter how many times he tried, Tewu could never breach the DMZ. At the border, his face smacked right into an invisible wall. In a second attempt, he generated some momentum from a far enough distance, believing he could run right through. A force repelled him upon impact in a burst which sent him flying farther back each time he tried to run faster. The wall bombarded Tewu, as if waiting to detonate upon his every charge, as if powered by the million slumbering landmines scattered around both sides of the DMZ, and the many bombs dropped and unexploded, waiting to be found. He pounded on the wall and sobbed, the wall invisible until they came into contact. It vibrated with each thwack, an electric ripple searing the wall and Tewu both. Its lasting burn reverberated through him, the wall remaining hot from the controlled fires, devouring underbrush that would have obstructed both sides from locating any potential threats. Not knowing the wall itself was most well fed, would cause the greatest harm. Tewu wondered if the family he left behind a lifetime ago had ever attempted the same. If they ever went down near where he stood then to find him, Tewu knew he had been long forgotten, and rightly so. This didn't deter him from trying. After all, he believed they were all dead at this point, and if not, he could at least spend his time searching for an indication of how they had lived. His first wife, his son. But he was weak. Most ghosts from South Korea, their spirits fed and unforgotten, could interact with the physical world if strong enough. They could protect their descendants who observed ritual services every year. Estranged from his family in the South, Tewu spent most of his time wandering along the DMZ to get acquainted with the wall. When light hit the wall from a certain angle, it shimmered the faintest blue. On the day Tewu could have sworn he saw a bird fly right over what he calculated to be the wall's apex, he asked a new friend, Youngshik, to join him on an excursion. Youngshik was from South Korea, having died at an old age in his home. Moved by Tewu's determination, he entertained Tewu's theory of the wall and its limits. Against the sun, the bird was a dark shadow. It could have been a red-crowned crane, or perhaps a three-legged crow. Youngshik picked up a rock, Tewu's eyes widening as it lifted off the ground. Youngshik braced himself to throw it like a shot put as high as he could. The rock barely made it above their heads and landed with a thump, dropping with Tewu's heart. After years of trying to find an entry point, after years of convincing more dead, those from the north who had similar aspirations to return, and those from the south who had relatives in the north and wanted to help, Tewu had assembled a large group of all ages at the DMZ, sharing in common an unforgiving hunger. The orphaned, widowed, and lonely among them, those who could speak Japanese, students who protested with their lives, dispersed families who appeared on TV to broadcast their hopes and find their long-lost relatives, the elderly who couldn't participate in reunions between North and South and Mount Kumgang, and children who dared each other to leave their hands on the wall and withstand the pain, all of whom carried a reason to persist, a face they wished to see before they too were eventually forgotten. The dead gathered around Daewoo, whispering among themselves, nodding. Even in death, the war of their lives was far from over. "This divide will not stop us," he exclaimed. "We will find a way." The dead looked up to Daewoo, their faces bright with hope. The sun shone through them as Daewoo promised they would overcome the DMZ. At the end of his speech, Daewoo explained, as Youngshik stood firm and held him high, they needed to get as tall as possible and assemble a tower. Dead men sat on the shoulders of dead men, wobbling at first until they found balance. 5 huddled in a circle at the base, and another 5 climbed onto their shoulders. 5 more, and so on. The dead women came along to watch and contemplate how the stacking was possible. They laughed as they watched the dead men struggle, all led by the biggest dead fool of all, the king fool, they joked, admiring Daewoo's conviction. No one believed it would work, but they also hoped for a miracle, a sign it would be possible. Daewoo climbed the tower of dead men who grunted as they stepped on their shoulders. The tower of dead mumbled and cussed to themselves about why they weren't the ones climbing, though they were each promised a turn. Daewoo reached the tower's apex, though he paled in size, to Paektu and Mount Kumgang. He could only see so far north, and he wondered where to find his loved ones. He steadied himself on the shoulders of Youngshik, who stuck with him from the beginning, who got on his knees to help his friend in their first attempt. They thought Daewoo would fall right through Youngshik, but when Daewoo lifted off and they stood at the height of 2, they ran around, laughing like boys. He would need to jump over to the other side. The wind howled around him, but it wouldn't shake his resolve. Daewoo leaped forward. The whole tower fell backward, the dead tumbling over the dead as they piled and swore on the ground. For a moment, Daewoo believed he would make it. He wished. He hit the wall, a loud zap, and crashed below. Thank you so much. That was the opening chapter of Nuclear Family, and really appreciate your time, and thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to your questions.
I will be reading from a story called As Meaningless as the Origin. After the continuous days of drying gypsum and cleaning the hock and trowel with cold bucket water, my hands had stiffened, the skin between my fingers split. The homeowner, a fat-handed computer tech from the Northwest, watched as Lucas and I washed drywall mud off our heads and bodies. He kept thanking us for all our hard work. It took artisans like us to float out such smooth, no-texture walls. We doubted his meaningless, automatic sincerities. Despite having met the bid, we'd gone a week over the estimated month and had never addressed the homeowner with anything but degradation. We knew no one else would have driven out this far to hang sheetrock for a guy who had made many attempts to top the workday off with Earl Grey and female pop music. Lucas had said, "Listen, this isn't a fucking bathhouse, asshole. Why don't you go ogle some Twinkie internet fucks instead?" I wouldn't have called the homeowner a pushover. He certainly had the slump demeanor of someone used to antagonism, but he was thick-skinned enough to respond confidently because of the financial gain he'd made in his life. "I wasn't ogling," he said. "I just thought that you two looked like skinheads. Anyway, your payment is under a rock on the front porch." He slammed his back door, frowning. The translucent figures of Lucas and me were mirrored on the glass, and beyond them, he stared doubtfully at his wet gypsum walls. They'd take 2 days to dry until he could paint over them, which we hadn't told him. "Sassy bitch," said Lucas. "Fucking right," I said. "What skinheads do you know who are now? Should have told him that the noble days of braids and mullets are over, and motherfuckers who don't want to pay 40 on a haircut keep it close." Lucas said, "He'll ride along with his house. There isn't anybody who'll do the upkeep. This place will be an abandoned shell. Let's get out of here." We dried ourselves with our shirts, gathered our tools, and loaded them into my truck. I finished off a joint while Lucas went to grab the money. I watched as he bent down, picked up what looked like 2 checks instead of the cash we'd agreed on. Lucas shoved both rectangular pieces of paper into his pants pocket, undid his fly, and pissed on the porch. The nasal squeak of some pubescent singer blared from the rear of the house, while I turned to stare at the faint eastern horizon, then back to the throbbing shell. There was no evidence that Lucas and I had ever been there. Nothing of our thoughts to be considered, nothing in the structure or trim that held any personality. Our work was as meaningless as the origin of any of the materials used in constructing the place. We laughed at its plain simplicity and left. Now, as the sky swallows the silhouette of Humphrey's Peak, the highway becomes a darkened corridor of trees. The dual center lines of the road stream yellow through the curves and hills, the distance ahead discernible in the weak beam of the truck's headlights. Lucas tells me he intends to make New Orleans a week after I make Alaska, my flight in a few days. The bus ticket south is cheap and they don't hassle anyone for IDs. The long, cramped trip is worth the inevitable claustrophobia. He imagines that by pursuing the woman he's infatuated with, Denise, to another city, love is inevitable. They can start a life together in some inexpensive shithole. It'll all work out in a different locale, new and unknown possibilities. My high school buddy's mother moved to Alaska and has a boyfriend in need of framers, idiots who can seek nails, do basic addition, work 12-hour days, and live on an island. The toughest part about the job, my buddy said, was the seclusion, the limits of escape. I won't know what I'm in for until I can judge what surrounds me, decide what's meant by limits. Once we get to town, Lucas and I plan one final trip to Cherry Pie's Gentleman Club, a small and destitute strip joint in the clogged heart of Flagstaff. It was built as an addition to the back storage room of a dank bar frequented by mid-afternoon drunks and tradesmen looking for cheap swill and the unattainable college girls who pre-gamed there before heading to the packed meat market bars. Lucas and I had hung and taped sheetrock, painted the walls matte black, and installed all the mirrors over the course of a few days some months back. The homeowner shorted us on the final bill, always vanishing whenever we showed up, and so we started drinking there. The bartenders rarely tabbed us out over $20 a piece, no matter how much we threw back or how long we stayed. So not being paid in cash and having to deal with the checks later won't keep us from the inebriated normality of our final night out. We don't look forward to running into anyone. The relationships we've had, both as short-lived as memories after late evenings. We talk about no longer having to listen to or hear about impossible projects of self-glorified handymen who never have the right tools, timeline, or helpers to fund their functional alcoholism. House painters who claim secret lives as artists and who hijack the traditional iconography and style of more successful native painters and blame their lack of success on affirmative action. Live-in tourists who own second homes and who bitch that the town needs more gentrification, the poverty with youth sentiment no longer authentic. the unspoken club of good old boys who hire and contract among themselves so that most of the builders are the same hungover potheads who constructed every other piece of shit subdivision. We commiserate further until we recognize that neither of us has an address that we're destined to. We've made no living arrangements, and that email will only replace handwritten letters, which we'll lose interest in writing once the repetitive natures of our days sets in. The only thing we'll agree that'll keep us connected will be a similar list of past letdowns and annoyances, which will summon up alone in a bar when we related to nothing in our new settings, and we will reminisce about better days were had. That is, until those memories begin fading and we become nothing to no one. It's like the job we just finished, says Lucas. You're in it until it's done, then you're on to the next one. The only thing you take with you is what you've learned from unforeseen problems and ways around them. Troubleshoot. You learn how to troubleshoot and improvise. Lucas is the most asked for laborer in town, whether it's for tear-outs, trench work, drywall, carpentry, or tile. He's the first on many contractors' lists. His back and body outlast most, and he hardly bitches. He's been told that his mind's stronger than his body, the combination of the two giving him the potential to work anywhere, though I've known him to numb his thoughts repeatedly, and I've witnessed the strain of his exhaustion and restlessness. What I'll really remember is the sunset across the desert, he says. Nothing particular or detailed, just the light across the landscape and then it being taken away by shadows. The first time I met Lucas, he body checked me into a wall during a mosh pit at a metal show that featured local bands along with a few other bands from the res. It was one of those early evening to last call events, the crowd getting more raucous and rowdier as the music thrashed on. My shoulder had put a large hole in the drywall, and before the bartender threatened to kick us out, we both assured him that we had the skills to repair the damage, along with any other blemishments that needed attention. We arrived the following morning, hungover. In addition to our taste in music, we found commonality in using the blowout patch as the most efficient repair method. By cutting the sheetrock an inch larger around the perimeter of the hole and scoring and peeling back the excess so that the flap of paper remained, the taping could be skipped and the floating out done smoother, quicker. The last time we were at Cherry Pies, Lucas got blackout drunk. I wavered on its murky edges and passed out during a lap dance from a girl whose stage name was either Destiny or Dawn, and whom he had slept with back when the place first opened. She was rightly pissed, emotionally bruised, her ego gut punched. I think she might have had a thing for Lucas beyond the sultry demeanor she put on for work. After that, we drank at the bar only in the early evenings on weekdays. Lucas denied being embarrassed, and I reminded him that it was I who had to bear the weight of knowing a guy who was bored by lap dances. Lucas and I order a round of beers and whiskey shots. We shoot the liquor, tap the bar with our glasses for another round, and scan the place. Both pool tables are taken, and the secondhand couch near the fireplace is occupied by two polo shirt-wearing bro dudes and a girl dressed in a shiny, skimpy answer. Think they're all just friends, asked Lucas. Sure, I say, until they start fucking each other and one of those two assholes gets possessive. We laugh and clink cans, throw back our burns of whiskey. I'm not going to miss any of this shit, says Lucas. No, you won't. You'll feel the rush of someplace new. You can be less than no one. And by the time you get bored or brokenhearted, it'll all begin to seem like the same old shit again. Lucas shakes his head. Denise has been locked up for hooking herself away out of town and in care facilities for breakdowns, suicide attempts. Either way, there's a lot of passion. Her past boyfriends have usually been drug dealers, keeping her dose calm. With Lucas, it's a threat of his temper, the comfort of his physical strength over hers. I haven't been with a woman for more than a few nights, with months and months between those lucky moments. And I haven't kept an apartment for more than half a year. A modern-day nomad, though, to be honest, I don't know what I'm working toward and haven't stayed still long enough for loneliness to take root and blossom. Listen, he says, you want my advice? I've traveled with only a bag on my back and had to begin where I didn't intend to be. Don't do more than you think you can handle, and you only fuck yourself. That's it. Don't do more than you can handle. Lucas has always alluded to growing up in affluence. Ivy League assurance, high-rise condos, parents something to do with dignitaries between Ontario and Poland. He had hit the road in a van with guys bound for California. The transmission blew in Arizona, 60 miles east of Flagstaff. Lucas was the only one who stayed. having found a junk collecting woman who allowed him to pitch a tent on her lot next to a wall of broken refrigerators. I'm learning what I can handle as I go along, I say, but I expect that I'll take on too much at some point. It's the only way to really know your limits. Lucas nods, drinks his beer. We watch the two polo shirts leave with the skimpy dress following. She turns and smiles in our direction, but not at us. Her happiness isn't for us. Neither is it for the boys she trails. Lucas and I invert our glances as she vanishes through the door. An hour passes, maybe two. The guy who's laid tile on some of the jobs we worked shoves his head between Lucas and me. We've both been staring into our beers and shots quietly. I was thinking about seclusion and anonymity giving me the space to become someone new. Lucas was thinking about his girl, probably. That better be whiskey, says Conroy. Lucas and I both shrug. Conroy's voice sounds like he's holding vomit back or has been recently choked. He takes pride in smoking a pack of unfiltered daily, eating bacon sandwiches, owning body armor hammer molded out of aluminum sheets. He claims to have neo-Nazi associations. We suspect his so-called association is a self-conscious fantasy that justifies his balding head. There's nothing in Conroy's features that suggests any trace of Aryan blood. It's good to see two rough, hardworking sons of bitches out tonight. I just rolled up my job. Mind if I sit? Conroy takes a stool on either side of Lucas, placing his forearms splotched with grout that appear leprous over his tattoos on top of the bar. We'd first encountered Conroy while patching holes made by electricians. He reminded us continually not to get drywall mud in his grout lines. He took to Lucas and me because we'd play black metal in the stereo, and from that, he assumed we were like him. We weren't. He was just one more lowbrow tradesman eager to drink. Sit where you want, says Lucas. Just get the next round. Not a problem, says Conroy, waving down the bartender. Three of whatever firewaters these two have been drinking. Raising a shot, Conroy makes a toast to the American working class and national brotherhood. He calls Lucas brother and me chief. Neither Lucas nor I drink. Instead, we place our shots down on the bar. Lucas knows I'm never cool with strangers or acquaintances stereotype jest, especially if ignorant or unintentional. As for Lucas, he's easily annoyed with dismissive idiots mucking around in bastardized entitlement. Lucas pushes a shot towards Conroy and tells him, "You need to dull your stupidity and catch up." "Come on," says Conroy. "I know it's been a long day for you two. What you two refusing for?" "Just catch up," says Lucas, making an open-handed gesture. Conroy insists again, agitated and taking offense. Lucas tells him, "Listen, don't be a pussy. If you're all you think you are, you won't let a Polak and Trog drink you under the bar. What would be the pride in that? Now catch up." Conroy looks frustrated and confused. He says, "I never made you for a Polak, man. You're not a Jew, are you?" Lucas says, "No." Conroy shoots one shot. He looks at me and I think of how satisfying it'd be just to glass him, except I'm drinking from a can. Lucas knows what I'm thinking because as Conroy is focused on me, Lucas holds his beer and mocks slamming it against Conroy's head. "He's right," I say. "You can't just let us drink you under the bar." Conroy smiles, takes the remaining shot. Lucas orders more rounds. The conversation shifts to metal genres and mosh pitting, the three of us differentiating the nuances of satanic, black, thrash, satanic black, gore, gore thrash, sludge, grind, dirty black, and experimental. Conroy's inability to understand anything beyond satanic black metal bands, generally from Nordic regions, leads him to tell us that his girlfriend is stripping tonight and that we should watch her because she'll strip to anything metal, and he wants to hear some metal. Lucas leans close to me, says, "Shit, man, I think I want to see what lame bitch would allow this loser's prick inside her." I agree that I'm curious about the sexual preferences of racists, the physical features, and wonder if their spawn will turn out just as ugly and inarticulate. Lucas agrees, since Conroy will be picking up the rounds. Avoiding the seats around the stage, the three of us post up at the bar in the corner, where we won't be expected to tip the girls who are performing. We won't be approached for private dances, since Lucas fell asleep and I'm his known associate. Conroy orders a round, and this time he doesn't say shit about anything because he takes his shot. Instead, he walks over to a thick-thighed, tiny-titted girl with black hair cut in the fashion of a skin chick, long, sharp bangs with the rest but short. She's flirting with a customer, a native-looking guy, Pima maybe, who acts as if he's used to the attention of half-naked white women trying to get money off him. It's a job, I think, You're in it for the wage, no matter your dislike of the client. Conroy stands before them, his back to me, so I can't see his expression. Pima has his hands up, obviously annoyed, his mouth moving quickly. Conroy turns his head toward the guy a few times before gulping his drink and pointing at him while talking. The girl intervenes, standing now with a hand on Conroy's chest. Pima nods, smiling at the girl's ass, which isn't bad, and Conroy takes the girl's hand and attempts to move it. A bouncer and a bartender run and grab Conroy, pulling him back towards Lucas and me, while the girl makes apologetic gestures to the Pima as she leads him toward the walled-off private dance area. Conroy's face is red, spittle on his chin. He looks at the ground as the bartender tells him to keep cool and assures the bouncer, who's new, that everything's a misunderstanding. Conroy picked the wrong time to talk with his girl. The bouncer returns to his spot in the shadows, and the bartender, patting Conroy's back, walks back behind the bar and pours us one on the house. Damn, says Lucas, I'm getting slightly shitty. Same here, I say, looking at my glass and swirling the liquid. Conroy leans over to me, saying, what the fuck's the problem with your shit-stained cousin over there? He can't see that I'm trying to talk to my woman? That redskin thinks he has some sort of right being here? Shit. It's a strip joint, I say. You interrupted a business transaction. Besides, I'm an Navajo asshole. I don't have shit to do with Pimas. You've got different beliefs and everything. I can't speak for him. Conroy makes the noise of a punctured tire with his mouth. Fuck it, I need a joint. Let's go to my place. I've got whiskey there too. While Conroy makes his way out of the club, Lucas and I stare at each other, looking for an expression of agreement. Lucas smiles. What's the deal with this prick? He's so dejected that he has to invite us over after saying stupid shit to both of us and try showing off his lump of a girlfriend. But hell, free whiskey is free whiskey. True, I'm down for a joint, but I thought skidhens only smoked meth. Pretty sick of his bullshit, though. Forget about it, says Lucas. We'll handle it. Everything will be all right. Walking outside, it seems as if the night's brighter than the strip joint's interior. I look back, thinking that only the matte black walls, the mirrors, lights, pole, faux velvet, and vinyl seats will remain the same. The atmospheric voice of the DJ is steady and placating drone. The rest is interchangeable, the bouncers, the girls, the customers. And it seems we're all the same person, coming from work with money meant for better things, coming from a job we lost, wishing that the next one lasts long enough to get us by, coming from nowhere, only to follow someone who needs something of us into a room where we hope they at least turn on the light before closing us in. Thank you.
And we are back. Hello, everyone. I'm Wing, an MFA student here at UCR, and I'm here to moderate our Q&A session. So first of all, thank you so much, Joseph, Vanessa, and Bojan, for those absolutely beautiful readings. I want to make sure that you all get a chance to talk to each other and to our audience. So, audience, please submit your questions in the Q&A, not the chat. So this allows everyone to vote for the questions that they'd most like to hear answered, and we'll try to get as many as possible before the session ends. So to get us started, I will grab a question from the Q&A. Do you think that there is something about the way that we are haunted by the past in all three pieces? Most obvious as a theme is Joseph's, of course, but in all three?
Wonderful to be able to hear. I'm not muted, right? Yeah. It was wonderful to hear everyone. But yeah, that question's definitely something I thought about with Forbidden City, which is told with retrospective narration. Primarily, the book is set during the Cultural Revolution in China in 1965, but both the prologue and epilogue are set in 1976 when the chairman has died. And she's reflecting upon the tumultuous years of her life as a teenager and of our country. And I think and this book is very much about her journey from youthful idealism to realizing that all that she lived for or dreamt of was quite different.
And one other thought, even though it's historical fiction and set in the past, I think what I found in the writing of the book is that the past is never as distant as it seems. And that, in fact, in the 14 years it took to write the book, thinking about the Me Too movement and the pandemic, although those events are anachronistic to the events of the book, they shaped who I was as a writer and also as how it's received by readers. So thoughts about power dynamics between younger men and women, America's relationship with China, demagoguery and despots. It is all a mirror to how we live now as well.
Yeah, Vanessa, I really like what you said about the past always being present. And it was something that I really had to wrap my head around in writing about a history that's ongoing, and how to tell a story about the Korean War in a way that talks about it as it's been inherited by a younger generation, a diasporic Korean character, and how they reconcile with the secrets and the unknowing of this history that they are not so much seeking as they are already a part of, and that surrounds them. And yeah, the Korean War is technically ongoing. There hasn't been a peace treaty, and the war manifests in many different ways through joint military exercises between South Korea and the US, through increasing militarization all across the globe. So, starting the story with a ghost story, I thought was most appropriate to show how the past continues to live on.
Hello. Yeah. I mean, I live in Arizona. I grew up in Arizona. There's a lot of borders here. There's the Mexican-American border. There's a border of the Native Nations. It's like I grew up here, but there's people in Phoenix who went to like high school and don't know shit about Navajos. Who are just up the road. Like the U.S., America has a huge amnesia problem and likes to conveniently forget everything, every sort of failed act of imperialism that has created genocide and destitution across the world and within its own borders here. So I like what Joseph and Vanessa said about I think even as writers we're continually present in our practice, but like we're always looking forward via reflection. And you can't forget, you have to honor your ancestors, honor the struggle, and fight for your living breath. So thanks for the question.
Thanks very much to everyone for all of your wonderful answers. The past is absolutely always present, and it often is not the past at all, but rather just forgotten. So on that note, I would like to just transition to Greg Beckman's question. I mean, how would you describe your relationship or the relationship between fiction and autobiography? Another way to put this is, what is your relationship with the texts that you've created? And maybe, Vanessa, would you like to start us off?
Oh, sure. It's interesting. Often people ask questions like, well, which character is your favorite one? And that's sort of like asking me, which one of your twin sons is your favorite, right? They're all my favorite. And in fact, they are all born from my imagination. They're all my children. Or even they're all aspects of me, but kind of taken in from a slant. And I will say this, in the researching of this novel or in putting this novel together, you never know quite what element from your background or experience might someday contribute to your work. For example, freshman year of college, one of the most popular classes on campus was social dancing, ballroom dancing. In fact, it's still one of the most popular classes on campus, I heard from a student who still goes there. And, with that knowledge, I was able to understand how to bring to life a hugely iconic character like Mao, who is iconic in the true sense of the word. His giant portrait hangs in Tiananmen Square. He's larger than life. But how do you get at the visceral? How do you get at the body in motion? And it came from knowing what it's like to be waiting in hushed anticipation as the beats of music are about to begin, or what it is like to be sort of swung through the space like with centripetal force. Likewise, Mao swam every day, took important meetings at the pool, and in fact kicked off the Cultural Revolution with this famous swim in Wuhan in the Yangtze River. And in that same way, when I injured my foot in my 20s, I took up swimming. And who knew that someday those experiences would help me cast scenes or understand or become a part of the book. And I think books in some way, or whether they're whatever genre, are a reflection of what obsessions we harbor as writers. Like that's the only thing that would keep us in our seat, keep us going in the face of rejection. So again, it's the books are all encoded with our DNA, but how the traits manifest are entirely different with each book.
Thank you so much for that answer. Yes, absolutely. I really liked what you said about a slant, and I'm just wondering if any of our other speakers would like to answer that question before we move on.
I can go.